calling this video Sleep or Die. I'll tell you about a really horrible experience that I just had in my life. Just a few hours ago I got released from the hospital, and it was really a terrible experience, but there's a great message and lesson that I've learned, and I want to share it with you guys. In the past, I've seemingly been indestructible. I pushed my body through incredible physical efforts, testing my fruitarian diet, and I've just been unable to break. No matter how many miles I run, or how many hard workouts I put in, or how many races I do, I just never seem to be able to get run down or even sick. Without any injuries, I just kept going, and I continued to push and push and push my limits, and I thought that I just basically had no limits. Everything came down to how much did I want to suffer mentally. Well, I finally met my breaking point, and it had nothing to do with my diet. It had to do with another critical factor, health, and that's sleep. Here's the story. About 12 days ago, my wife and I got on a plane and we flew out from New York to the state of Washington to go to Dr. Doug Graham's Health and Fitness Week. We left 2 days early because we wanted to visit our friends Sean and Kathleen, who live in the Seattle area, and I wanted to get in some good long runs in preparation for the National 24-Hour Championship run, which was happening the following week. I knew I was going to be pressed for time the entire week because I wanted to do a lot. I wanted to try to run almost 50 miles a day, and I wanted to try to attend as many lectures as I could with Dr. Graham. I wanted to socialize as much as I could with all the people that share the common interests that I love to talk about, and I knew that sleep was going to be a pretty big issue for me. I did the best I could, but it wasn't enough. The first day out in Washington, I got up at 5:30 in the morning with Sean, and we went out for a long run, and I put in 55 miles with about 7,000 feet of climbing. Then I drove up to Health and Fitness Week and got to meet everybody, saw some old friends. Of course, stayed up a little bit too late. Then the next morning I woke up at about 6 a.m. because that's when the health and fitness classes start, and there's quite a bit of noise, and I couldn't really get back to sleep. So probably only got about 6 hours that night. Still ran another 50 miles and felt pretty good. I ended up running pretty fast. I ran 6 hours and 29 minutes, which is about, I think, 7:40 or 7:45 pace. So even though I didn't have much sleep for 2 days, and I just put in 105 miles in 2 days, I still felt really good. But again, the next morning I got woken up at about 6 a.m. when the health and fitness classes started, and I was pretty tired on the third day, but I still got out there and I did a double and I put in 50 miles. It was pretty tough towards the end. The last 15 miles were quite difficult, but I got through it. I tried to go to sleep earlier and did, but again the next morning woke up at 6 a.m. with the noise of people getting ready for the fitness classes. That next day I ran 50 kilometers or 31 miles, and then I decided that I had to start my taper for the 24-hour nationals that were going to be taking place in 3 days. So for the next 3 days my taper consisted of a 15-mile run, then a 5-mile run, and then a 3-mile run. I left Health and Fitness Week sleep deprived, but I was still doing okay. So the 24-hour race gets off at 9 o'clock in the morning. My wife Victoria is also a last-minute entrant into the race, which I was pretty surprised that she would even attempt to do such a thing, but she does surprise me very often, and she jumped right in and she started running with me. The race didn't start off too well. I was pretty lethargic and sluggish for the first 2 hours, and then I started feeling pretty good. I got to 50 miles pretty quickly, and I was on pace to run 150 to 160 miles. My initial goal going into the race was to run at least 135, with success being 150 miles. But then about 8 hours into the run, I really just started to fall apart. My body just was not able to keep going. I was getting just tremendous fatigue in my entire body. Mentally, I was not motivated to run. And from experience, I know that these things can happen and you can come out of them. And I kept carrying on, even at a quite slow pace. And I did feel better at about 12 hours into the run, and I kept running for another couple hours at a pretty good pace. But then when I got to about 15 hours, I was at 87 miles. I could feel that this was over. The race was over for me. I had tremendous internal fatigue, and I knew that it just wasn't going to be my day. So my wife wanted to keep running, so I did the best I could to support her, and she ended up running for close to 18 hours, I think 18 and a half hours, and it was very exciting to see her just achieve something so fantastic. But I was a mess. I couldn't sleep the whole night, didn't sleep at all. We ended up going right to the airport after the race and flew back to New York. After I'd finished that 87 miles in about 15 hours, I was at 296 miles for 8 days. That's definitely the most I've ever run in that period of time, and the last 87 miles were followed up with virtually no sleep for 2 days. So it shouldn't be surprising that I hit a wall. About 2 days after I got back to New York, I was just really dazed. I was just really tired, and then I was going to sleep at about 2 o'clock in the morning after doing some business email work, and suddenly I just came down with the most horrific fever. And I haven't had a fever or been sick or anything since I became a fruitarian. And this was a really bad fever. I had 104. I was really delirious. I was hearing things. Felt like I was floating upside down. I was a complete wreck. I was scared. In the morning I woke up, and I didn't wake up. I was up all night sweating profusely. I told my wife that I had to go to the doctor immediately, that something seriously was wrong with me. Went to the doctor. He did a bunch of tests on me, and he concluded that there was a serious potential that I could have meningitis, bacterial meningitis. My head and my neck, my entire body was just aching. It was to an unbearable state where I was begging for any kind of relief. He called an ambulance, and they took me to the ER. That was some experience, being in an ambulance. I never would have guessed that would ever happen to me. Anyway, got to the ER, and they immediately wanted to give me a spinal tap to test for bacterial meningitis. And they warned me that waiting even an hour could be life-threatening. They said that about a year ago they had a guy in that had bacterial meningitis, and 6 hours after he was admitted, he died. And they pushed me to get the spinal tap immediately and not wait on other tests. It wasn't worth the risk. They told me about the potential complications of a spinal tap and paralysis, and I was very, very distraught. I had these awful nightmares of having a spinal tap and then having some paralysis or something. I couldn't bear to deal with the situation. I told them that I just wanted to wait, do some blood work on me, and try to eliminate or find out anything else they could about my condition being related to something else besides bacterial meningitis. So they drew blood, 5 separate occasions, which was also quite upsetting and difficult to deal with. They gave me 8 liters of IV before I went to the bathroom. I was severely dehydrated. But they came back with some really good news. They said that my white blood cell count wasn't elevated, and that if I had any bacterial issues, bacterial meningitis, or any kind of infection, that my white cell count would be very high, and it wasn't elevated. So that was great news. That meant that I did not have to get the spinal tap. But they still wanted to find out what it was that I had. They gave me a special new virus test that they said something that they've just started using, and they stuck these things all the way up my nose. It was very uncomfortable, and about an hour later they came back and said that I was positive for a strain of flu virus that was especially bad. The strain that I had is related to people being very sick for 2 to 3 weeks. So it was good news, but the thought of being sick for 2 to 3 weeks was something that was also very upsetting. I was in tremendous pain. I had very high fever now for close to 48 hours, and I was just in absolute agony. They admitted me into the hospital, and I stayed there for 2 days. I got a tremendous amount of IV fluids, and just basically Tylenol and some painkillers to try to help me deal with the pain. I'm quite embarrassed and ashamed at my behavior, that I would abuse my body to the point where I literally collapsed and put myself in a position where I became very sick. When I'm at home training in my regular schedule, I usually sleep until I wake up naturally. I turn off my phone, and I don't get up until I naturally want to get up. Traveling on airplanes and being in an environment where I'm not able to get regular sleep, and also trying to run a tremendous amount, is a recipe for disaster. And being in an ambulance and being in the emergency room around being surrounded by very sick people in the hospital was frightening, it was humbling, and I don't ever want to have it happen again. So I'm looking for a software program that turns my phone off automatically every day at 9 p.m. I'm going to install this program on all my computers in the house, and I'm going to take sleep as serious as my diet, and it's going to be a priority. I'm still pretty ill right now, but the worst is over, and I hope that my experience helps everybody else avoid what happened to me. So work out hard, but follow it up with good rest and a good clean diet and a low stress environment, and then you probably won't have any problems.
Oh God, I never want to go back to the hospital again, ever.